Patriotism means obedience. Age means wisdom. Woman means submissive. Black means inferior. These are preconceptions embedded so deeply in our thinking that we honestly may not know that they are there. This great quote was said during Gloria Steinem's commencement speech for Vassar College in 1970. Her speech, titled "Living the Revolution," was an address that meant to spark a change in American lives during the 1970s, and specifically women's roles. Through this speech, Steinem was able to use her platform to speak out about the strain our country was feeling because it did not want to liberate women. In order to fully understand the impact behind her words, I would like to share Gloria Steinem's background, which led to her advocacy and commencement address, as well as how she continues to strive for the goals she set over almost 50 years ago. From the start of her career, Steinem was focused on making social changes in favor of women's equality. Born in Toledo, Ohio in 1934, she had a rough childhood with an unconventional family dynamic after her mother had a nervous breakdown. This affected how her mother was perceived by her doctors and community. It gave Steinem a first glance at how women, especially mentally ill women, were looked at by society. After her parents separated, she took responsibility to care for her mother. These first experiences helped Gloria find her passion to fight for women in all areas of life. According to the National Women's History Museum, after graduating from Smith College, she took on a fellowship in India and later became a journalist in New York. As was normal for women in journalism during the 1950s, she was only allowed to really work in the background. This was among the first times she experienced sexist attitudes at the hands of her boss, which was common to this industry. After pushing her boundaries with controversial assignments, like investigating Hugh Hefner, she got her break when she was asked to help create the New York Magazine, which is the same magazine where she later became an official editor and writer. After her public participation in women's rights demonstrations, she was sought out to speak for the women's movement. This led to her invitation to deliver the commencement speech at Vassar College. Gloria used this opportunity to focus on the women's movement and point out why every generation should do their part for it to be successful. From the beginning of her speech, she focuses on the term humanist instead of feminist, which sets up the tone for the remainder of her address. She honestly states that her goal is to help the audience unlearn the American values they knew, because they had been instituted by racism, sexism, and elitism. Steinem then dedicated the majority of her speech to discuss the myths about women that had contributed to the beliefs in society that their role was perfect as is. The most detrimental myth was that women already experienced equality. With sincerity and emotion, she admits that it's a myth that women have allowed. Psychologically, all women knew the easiest way to make it in society was to at the very least pretend to be submissive to men. It's because of this, Gloria argued, that as a group, the women of the 1970s experienced an internal aggression. The result was that women validated their own womanhood by being submissive to the powerful men and wanting other women to fail. Next, Steinem addressed the myth about the need for full-time mothers. She then emphasized a repetitive dialogue to explain why this myth was so hard on mothers. She said, "No more so-called Jewish mothers, who are simply normal, ambitious human beings with all their ambitions confined to the house. No more wives who fall apart with the first wrinkle because they've been taught their total identity depends on their outsides. No more responsibility for another adult human being who has never been told she is responsible for her own life, and who sooner or later comes up with the same version of, 'If I hadn't married you, I could have been a star.'" This helped her stress the need for a change in the normal family dynamic. It also helped her explain that the liberation of women was not a danger to the family, but instead would get rid of the resentment from being a full-time mother. Her concluding remarks acknowledge that until we are all liberated, none of us can be liberated. And every new generation can see how destructive the past has been. Steinem's last call to action is to stand up against society, despite the consequences, because paying the price for change will always be worth it. Living the Revolution is a great example of the impact that Gloria Steinem had on our people in New York. After decades, she can still be seen fighting for women's equality today. Gloria Steinem has left a lifelong legacy that continues to promote the betterment of society. According to the National Women's Hall of Fame, she helped co-found Miss Magazine, a publication that encourages openly covering the battle of women's rights, as writers confronted traditional roles that women were expected to take part in. Steinem is still a contributor to this magazine today. Her projects, such as the Miss Foundation of Women and the Women's Media Center, continue to advocate for helping others take a stand for what is right. And in 2013, Gloria Steinem was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama for her ongoing activism for women's rights. In conclusion, Gloria Steinem has helped this nation and its women by using her voice in fighting for civil rights, despite the consequences. With her commitment to achieving equality for all women, her work still inspires many today. Her speech, Living the Revolution, remains an important milestone for the women's movement, especially because of its refusal to honor an unjust system. However, Steinman's plea for the liberation of all is still relevant in today's society. With that being said, I'd like to leave you with Steinman's brilliant words from 1970. The challenge to all of us, and to you men and women who are graduating today, is to live a revolution, not to die for one.